She woke up in the hospital and told everyone I tried to kill her. I was just trying to hold her hand, but by then the lies had already buried the truth. Hey there folks, welcome back. I wish I had a lighter story to share today, but life doesn't always give you a choice, does it? It started the same way it always does. You ready, babe? Brooke purred without even giving me a chance to answer. She lowered herself onto me slowly, teasingly, that same mischievous grin on her face. God, I've missed this, she whispered, looking down at me like I was her favorite sin. But just as things were heating up, I heard a sharp, unnatural pounding, like someone banging on a metal pipe in the back of my mind. The sound pulled me further out of that perfect moment, and just like that, her face twisted, not in pleasure but in mockery. The image of her blurred, then vanished altogether. I was waking up. Again. The dream faded the same as it always did, part desire, part nightmare. Cold reality settled in as my eyes blinked open. That banging sound? Yeah, it wasn't in my head anymore. Someone was actually at the door. Pounding hard. Still groggy and half tangled in my sheets, I swung my legs over the side of the bed and grabbed my robe off the chair. My body ached, more from sleeplessness than anything else. I shuffled toward the front door of my apartment, every step more awake than the last. Mr. Sanderson opened the door. Police, a sharp voice called from the other side. That got my attention. I opened the door to find 4 men standing in the hallway. 2 were dressed in uniform. The other 2 were plain clothes. One of them, a tall guy with a square jaw and the kind of face you forget 5 minutes after seeing it, stepped forward and flipped open a badge. Logan Sanderson? I'm Detective Sergeant Mark Moon, he said flatly. We'd like to come in and have a word. I've seen my share of law enforcement credentials over the years. Growing up where I did, that kind of thing becomes second nature, so I could tell it was legit. But still, something about the guy rubbed me wrong, so I leaned in, squinting like I needed a closer look. Not because I couldn't see it, just to tick him off a little. All right, fine, I said, stepping aside. But whatever this is, I've got nothing to worry about. They followed me into the kitchen, heavy-footed and serious, while I reached for the kettle and clicked it on. If they were going to drag me out of bed before sunrise, they were at least going to do it to the sound of boiling water. What's this all about? I asked, keeping my voice even. I'll be the one asking the questions, Moon snapped. Then I'll be the one not answering anything until my lawyer shows up, I replied, not missing a beat. His jaw twitched. Got something to hide, Mr. Sanderson? That's when my stomach dropped. Something didn't feel right. Not just the tone, not just the early morning raid. No, it was the name. The other guy, Detective Collins, he'd known me for years. We weren't friends, but we'd crossed paths enough. And he always called me Logan. Always. Not Mr. Sanderson. That felt formal. Too formal. Like I was already on trial. I don't have anything to hide, I said slowly. But I do feel a little ganged up on. For if you show up at 5 in the morning and expect me to just roll with it? Nah. If you're going to question me, I'd like to know what it's about and in what context. Moon gave me a look, the kind you give someone right before you lay out bad news. I'm making inquiries about your ex-wife. She was in an accident late last night. I blinked. An accident? Is she okay? She's in intensive care, he said. Doctors say it's not life-threatening and that she's stable for now. The air in the room felt different suddenly, like the gravity had shifted. I need to know where your Range Rover is right now, Moon continued. I stiffened. Are you saying my car had something to do with this? Last night, around 11 p.m., your ex-wife, Nicole Sanderson, and a man named Anthony Pryor were walking down Finchley Avenue. A Range Rover, moving at high speed, mounted the sidewalk and drove straight at them. Your ex-wife was hit. Mr. Pryor wasn't. I didn't know what to say. My brain was scrambling to make sense of it. I hadn't seen Nicole in months. We weren't on good terms, but I'd never wish harm on her. And my Range Rover? I just stood there for a second, the silence stretching. Water boiled in the background, unnoticed. He says it wasn't an accident, Detective Moon added, watching me closely. According to Mr. Pryor, it looked like someone deliberately tried to run them both down. The driver didn't stop, just kept going. I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around it. Wait, he's saying this was intentional? That someone tried to kill them? That's right, Moon nodded. Which is why I'd like to have a look at your Range Rover. Right now. I let out a sharp breath, rubbing the back of my neck. Well, you're out of luck. She's not here. Bessie's been in the shop all week, Roland's garage, getting the gearbox replaced. Again. He didn't look thrilled. With a glance at the 2 uniformed officers, he gave a quick nod. They immediately turned and headed off, likely to check with Roland themselves. Is there any way you can prove you were home last night, Mr. Sanderson? I gave a dry laugh and shook my head. You're kidding, right? That's the whole definition of being alone. I don't have anyone to confirm it. I was here by myself. No visitors. No calls. No reason to think I'd need to have someone vouch for me. Moon didn't blink. In that case, I'm going to have to ask you to come down to the station. We'd appreciate your cooperation. I sighed and nodded. Fine. But I'm calling my lawyer first. And I'm not going anywhere in a robe. He gave me a curt nod and I stepped away to ring up my solicitor. Unsurprisingly, the guy wasn't thrilled to be yanked out of sleep before sunrise. But I got him on board, then headed to the bedroom to throw on some clothes. When we stepped outside my building, I caught sight of our resident busybody, Mrs. Cummings, peeking through her kitchen window like she was watching a soap opera. Ever since her husband passed, she'd made a full-time job out of observing the rest of us poor souls on the block. I turned to Detective Collins. If you really want the scoop on my whereabouts last night, have a chat with the woman behind that curtain. She keeps better tabs on this neighborhood than any security system ever could. Collins and Moon exchanged a look. Collins gave a short nod and turned back to knock on the woman's door while Moon led me down to their car. We sat there in silence for a few minutes. I stared straight ahead, watching as the street slowly came to life in the early morning haze. Then Collins reappeared from the building, crossing the pavement in quick strides. Moon stepped out to meet him, and the two of them exchanged a few animated words. A moment later, Collins returned to the car and leaned down toward my window. To be fair, Logan, he said, the old bird says she saw you get home at 8, and that you didn't step foot outside again until well after 2 when she went to bed. I raised an eyebrow. She stays up until everyone on the street has turned in? He smirked. Who knows? She's nosy, sure, but maybe that nosiness just saved you a heap of trouble. She lives for this stuff, I muttered. And speaking of neighbors, I suppose you heard what happened with the woman in number 8? Doug gave a small shrug. Bits and pieces. Well, I sighed, you know how I get when I lose my temper. Back then I wouldn't let her explain anything. I just snapped. Told her to get out. Made threats. Said things I shouldn't have said about her and about Tony Pryor. I guess it's no wonder your guys showed up here with sirens blazing. He paused, then said quietly, honestly? It wasn't us. It was Pryor. He's the one who pointed the finger at you. Listen, I said quietly, glancing over at Collins as we sat in the station parking lot. I think we need to have a proper talk, off the record, once all this settles a bit. Just you and me. He didn't respond right away, but I could tell he was thinking it over. There were things I wasn't ready to say in front of the others, but he and I went back a ways, and I hoped maybe he'd remember that when the time came. Anyway, all of this really started years ago, long before flashing badges and 5 a.m. door knocks. I met Brooke, my ex, at a dive bar called The Other Spot. That night could have ended in chaos if the bar manager hadn't had the good sense to call the cops when Brooke's date started getting loud and aggressive. The guy was carted off by the local cops, still yelling like a maniac. Now, I'm not saying I was some knight in shining armor, but I wasn't about to let her walk home alone after all that. So I offered her a ride, and yeah, maybe it was partly on instinct, maybe partly on that sliver of hope that there was something between us. She accepted. We didn't head home right away though. Instead, we stopped at another quiet place around the corner. Figured a drink might help calm her nerves. One turned into 2. After that, we started seeing each other regularly. Things got serious pretty quick. It felt natural. Easy. And then came the joy and heartbreak of our daughter Katie. She was just 3 months old when we lost her. Doctors called it sudden infant death syndrome. I've always hated that phrase. It's just another way of saying, we don't know what happened. And that kind of answer leaves a hole no amount of explanation can fill. After Katie's passing, it all started unraveling. Brooke changed. Her body, her emotions, everything went out of rhythm. Her cycle became unpredictable. We tried, God knows we tried, to have another child. Years went by and nothing. Her doctor eventually put her on birth control, not to prevent pregnancy but to help regulate things. Didn't make much of a difference though. Meanwhile, I did what I could. I worked, I came home, I tried to keep the peace. Some nights, Brooke would come home late from work, looking like she'd been run over by the day. I'd try to cook something decent, but when you're standing alone in the kitchen for half an hour, staring at ingredients like they're written in another language, eventually you just give up. That night I gave up. Called the local Chinese joint and had takeout brought over. By 7 p.m. the food had arrived. But Brooke hadn't. I was worried. More than usual. You read things these days, people vanishing, crime around every corner. so I called her office. The security guy told me everyone had cleared out hours earlier. I went through the list of her work friends, dialing each number one by one. We had one of those shared personal phones with contacts synced, thankfully. Still no luck. Nobody had seen her since the afternoon. Around 8:30, I heard the front door creak open. I rushed out of the kitchen and saw her silhouette near the hallway. She was tired, I could tell from the way she moved. She looked around like she was confused about where she was going. Then it happened. Instead of heading up to the bedroom, Brooke opened the wrong door and, just like that, tumbled straight down the basement stairs. It all happened so fast. I shouted, I think I did, but I couldn't reach her in time. 1 second she was there, the next she was gone through that open door. The ambulance showed up faster than I expected. We were lucky in one way, she didn't break any bones. But she was pretty banged up. Shocked, dazed, and barely able to walk. The next day, Detective Collins stopped by the house. He wanted the whole rundown, every little detail. I walked him through the night, from the takeout to the fall. He examined the basement stairs closely, asked me to show him where I'd been sitting at the time. I pointed to the couch and then to the corner where our old security monitor sat. Thank God for that system. I pulled up the footage from the night before. There she was, getting out of the taxi, swaying slightly, clearly exhausted or maybe a little out of it. You could hear her heels clicking up the path, then the front door creaking open. I played it for him in full. I wanted him to see it for himself. There was no malice, no plan. Just a tired woman who opened the wrong door in a dim hallway. After that, I helped her get dressed and I drove her back home. The doctor said she needed rest, plenty of it, and to take things slow. Honestly, that sounded like good advice for both of us. What really bothered me, more than the accident itself, was how Brooke handled things that night when she finally got home. I wasn't angry that she'd gone out with her friends. Honestly, I never had an issue with that, just like she never gave me grief when I went out for a drink with the guys. That part of our relationship had always been fair. But that night, she didn't tell me anything. Not a call, not a text. Nothing. I asked her later why she hadn't let me know she was going out, just so I wouldn't worry. But all she said was that she didn't remember anything from that day, not even the accident on the basement stairs. Claimed it was a complete blank. And maybe it was. Head trauma can do that, I suppose. Still, what hurt wasn't just her memory gap, it was the attitude she had when she walked through the door that night. Distant. Cold. Like I was just some guy she happened to share a house with. And there was something else too. I'd noticed before the accident that she was unusually friendly with one of my friends, Rob from my old crew. He was the kind of guy who always had a joke in his back pocket and that charming rogue energy women either loved or hated. Brooke seemed to light up around him. I tried not to think too much of it. Figured it was one of those matchmaker-type crushes. Someone looking for attention where there wasn't any. I let it go. Then about 8 months after Brooke's fall, I was wrapping up another long day at work when I stepped outside and saw DC Collins waiting by my car, flanked by 2 officers. Logan, he said. We need you to come down to the station. Just to answer a few questions. I asked what it was about, but they were already guiding me toward the unmarked car. If you refuse, we'll arrest you, one of them said flatly. At the precinct, I was brought into an interview room where a detective inspector I didn't recognize sat across from me. No small talk. No smile. Just a notepad and 4 straight hours of grilling me about Brooke's fall down the basement stairs. 4 hours. Same questions, different angles. Like they were trying to trip me up. Eventually they let me go. But that wasn't the end of it. Not long after, I ran into Tony Pryor, Pridey as some folks called him, outside a restaurant Brooke and I used to go to. I was walking up to her, just trying to say a few words, maybe clear the air, when he suddenly stepped between us like he was her bodyguard. She doesn't have anything to say to you, he snapped, arms crossed. I shook my head. Back off, Tony. I'm talking to my wife. That's when things took a nosedive into complete ridiculousness. Tony squared up like he was in a movie. Raised his fists and bounced on his toes, striking a classic boxer's pose. I'm warning you, he puffed. I'm an amateur boxer. I laughed in his face. Is that supposed to scare me? Brooke jumped in trying to defuse things. Tony, no. He'll hurt you. But Tony wasn't having it. He kept bouncing like some kind of knockoff Muhammad Ali. Before anything could really happen, 2 officers, who must have been lurking nearby, grabbed me from behind. I didn't even hear them coming. The next thing I knew, they had me in cuffs and shoved me into the back of a van like I was some kind of street thug. At the station they charged me with assault and battery. Just like that. I ended up in a holding cell, sitting there wondering how the hell I went from concerned ex-husband to public enemy number 1. Let's just say I've never had much love for the police, and that day didn't do them any favors. Fortunately, I knew a local attorney, Nate Jeffries, who'd helped a couple buddies of mine in the past. He got there fast and had me out almost as quickly. And that should have been the end of it. But no. As I was getting my things and about to leave, I heard Pridey's voice echo down the hallway. Loud. On purpose. So, Sheila, sweetheart, he practically yelled, what would you like for your dessert tonight? He said it like he was performing for an audience. I didn't even have to see his face to know he was smirking. It was obvious that line wasn't for her, it was for me. So, yeah, I changed direction. I didn't want to make a scene, but I also wasn't about to slink out like I'd been cornered. I walked past their table deliberately. Just wanted them to know I wasn't scared. When I got close enough, I caught the look on Tony Pryor's face. It shifted fast, from that smug, cocky attitude to something a lot more cautious. Almost nervous. I leaned in, low enough that I didn't have to raise my voice. Listen to me, I said, calm but firm. If either of you tries to embarrass me in public again, you're going to regret it. You understand? Neither of them said a word. I didn't wait for a response. I just turned and walked out. A few days later, I went to check in on Brooke at the hospital. I hadn't seen her in over a year and I figured she wouldn't want me there, but still, I had to know she was all right. What caught me off guard was seeing her registered under the name Mrs. Sanderson. That surprised me. After everything, I thought she'd have married Tony by now. Guess not. I checked in at the nurse's station and let them know who I was. One of them led me into a waiting room and said the doctor would be with me shortly. Not long after, a man in a white coat stepped in. Mr. Sanderson? He asked. That's me. He looked a little confused. I'm sorry, it's just, there was another man here earlier who said he was Mrs. Sanderson's fiancé. I shrugged. Could be. Like I said, I haven't seen her in over a year. I'm the ex-husband. But those vows, right? In sickness and in health. Some part of me still takes those seriously. He gave me a half nod, but the confusion lingered on his face. Just then I remembered Brooke's best friend, Amy. If anyone would know what was going on, it'd be her. I pulled out my phone to give her a call. But before I could even hit the contact, the doctor stopped me. Please, sir, hospital policy. No mobiles in this area. You can use the landline over there. I nodded and picked up the corded phone nearby, then dialed Brooke's office. Amy answered, and I could hear the surprise in her voice when I told her Brooke had been in an accident. Wait, what? Are you serious? No one told us anything. Not even Tony? I asked. Tony? She scoffed. Tony doesn't work here anymore. That threw me. Then I mentioned something I'd overheard earlier, that Brooke might have become a Jehovah's Witness. Amy just laughed. What? No. Brooke's not religious. Never has been. Before I could ask more, the door swung open and in walked Doug Collins. He looked like he hadn't slept. Figured you'd still be here, he said, pulling up a chair. What time is it? I asked, rubbing my temples. 7:30, he said. Still early, really? Amy had followed him in, but rushed right back out again, mumbling something about needing to postpone a date. She was clearly flustered. Doug leaned in, lowering his voice. She's still in surgery, he said. Been down there for hours. I nodded. I just hope she makes it through, for her sake. Doug paused. And for yours too, Logan? Thanks. So, what is it? You said you had something you wanted to talk about? He glanced around, then spoke even softer. You know what they say about a cop's nose? Well, mine's itching. That old woman, the one who lives near Brooke? She said something interesting. What now? There's a call box in the lobby of Brooke's office building, he said. It records every outgoing call. Guess what time someone used it? I frowned. Right after about half a dozen of Brooke's co-workers had come back from visiting her here. We're pretty sure someone made that call. A man. Audio confirms it. What does that mean? Doug looked at me seriously. I think Brooke told them she couldn't remember anything about the accident. And someone decided to stir the pot a little. I had my suspicions. I mean, I'd had a pretty solid idea of who might have been behind everything. But the part one couldn't wrap my head around was why. Doug looked at me and shook his head. You giving Pridey a good shove that day? That didn't help your case any. I sighed. You seriously think Tony's running around town with some wild story about me trying to knock off Brooke just so I can shack up with some mystery woman and play house with kids I don't even have? Doug gave me that look. The one where you can tell he didn't want to say yes, but he wasn't saying no either. That's exactly what he's saying, he replied. That you've got a girlfriend stashed away somewhere and a couple of kids. That Brooke was in your way, and that you wanted her out so you could move on, clean slate. I scoffed. That's insane. I haven't been seeing anyone. And I sure as hell don't have any little rugrats out there. Well, Doug said carefully, Brooke believes it. Or at least, someone made her believe it. I sat back in my chair, jaw tight. She thinks I tried to kill her. She's convinced you pushed her down those stairs. Or maybe not you exactly, but that it wasn't an accident. I rubbed my hands down my face. Sheila knew I'd never hurt her. We had issues but nothing like that. And now she thinks I'm cheating and trying to have her taken out. Doug leaned forward. Think about it. Someone out there made this look like a long-term thing. Left little breadcrumbs, enough for Brooke to follow until she hit that idea like a brick wall. Amy, who had come back into the room quietly, nodded. She said it herself, she thought the fall was on purpose. Someone convinced her it wasn't just her being drunk and slipping. But here's the kicker. Doug took over. She wasn't drunk. Not even close. The hospital ran blood tests that night. Barely enough alcohol in her system to flag anything. She was walking like she couldn't see straight. Yeah, but booze wasn't the reason. That's rubbish, I snapped. She could barely stand. Well, the blood work says otherwise. The doctors even thought she'd been drugged. But before they could dig further, guess who stepped in and told them to leave it? Amy and I answered at the same time. Tony. Doug nodded. Exactly. He held up 3 fingers. Let's keep count, shall we? 1. Tony feeds Brooke the idea that you're with someone else, probably Amy. 2. He plays it like her fall wasn't an accident. 3. What would have happened if Brooke woke up in someone else's bed the next morning? That shrink she went to, Dr. Myers, I think, he hypnotized her and pulled a memory. A detail. Amy's eyes lit up. Yeah, that's right. She remembered something under hypnosis. She remembered Amy, Doug said, turning to her. You were the name that came out. Amy looked stunned. Me? But I wasn't. Wait, this was all Tony, wasn't it? Doug leaned back, tapping a pen against the table. It gets worse. That therapist? We ran his info. Turns out he's connected to someone Tony knows. Small world, right? Amy shook her head. This whole thing's been twisted from the beginning. But why? If Tony wanted Brooke, why not just? Exactly, I cut in. Why go through all this if the endgame was just to be with her? Why set me up for the fall? Why drag Amy into it? Why not just take her and go? Doug glanced at me, serious now. What if Tony never wanted to be with her? What if what he really wanted was for her to die? The room went still. I blinked. Come again? Doug stared at me. Think about it. Maybe we've been looking at this from the wrong angle. Maybe he never cared about getting her away from you. Maybe he wanted her gone, for good. But then why feed her all that stuff about me? Why not just, let it happen quietly? Doug exhaled. Because if she's suspicious of you, if the story is all tangled up with betrayal and anger, then no one's looking at him. The guy's acting like a hero, standing beside her, defending her from her evil ex. While behind the scenes, he's the one pulling the strings. Amy covered her mouth. My God. I leaned forward slowly, heart pounding. So you're saying Tony tried to kill her. And somehow framed me for it at the same time. Doug nodded, grim. Looks that way. I leaned back in the stiff hospital chair, trying to piece together a mess that kept twisting in on itself. So what's the angle here? I asked quietly. Doug rubbed his temples, eyes narrowed in thought. That's exactly what we've got to figure out, Marty, he muttered. It's a stretch, sure, but it could all come down to money. Let's say someone knew Sheila came into an inheritance before your divorce was finalized. If you'd actually killed her, you wouldn't have been eligible to receive a dime of it. Amy and I just stared at him, trying to catch up with the logic. Far-fetched. Doug shrugged. Absolutely. But it lines up with everything else we've seen. Enough to keep digging. He stood, ready to leave. I'm heading back to the station. Gonna see what I can uncover about Mr. Anthony Pride? Or whatever his real name is. Marty, what was Sheila's maiden name again? Smith, I said. Sheila Smith. But beyond that? I've got no clue where she was born. Doug gave me a quick nod and left. The doctors had been straightforward earlier. They said the prognosis was fair, which is a medical way of saying, not great but not hopeless. They planned to keep Brooke sedated for a few days to reduce the swelling in her brain. All we could do was wait. Amy and I visited her room and I wish I could say it gave us comfort. But honestly, it looked like something out of a medical drama. Bandages everywhere, wires and tubes running in every direction, machines lined up beside her like some kind of warped orchestra, each one playing its own slow, mechanical note. The doctor said her body had taken a beating, multiple fractures, but it was the head trauma that had everyone on edge. We left the hospital together that evening. I didn't say much and neither did Amy. What was there to say? A couple days passed. I went back to work. Didn't feel right, but I needed something to focus on. They didn't push me. Guess that's the upside of being good at your job. They don't want to lose you, even when your life's falling apart. Then around 1:30 afternoon, Doug Collins showed up again. This time he wasn't alone. Detective Sergeant Moon came with him, though he kept his distance. The only time he even acknowledged me was to ask in a clipped voice how Brooke was doing. I figured he'd already talked to her doctor and was just trying to smooth things over. Doug pulled me aside. "We can't find Tony Pride," he said, voice low. "And by that, I mean the real Tony Pride. Turns out the guy you know isn't who he claimed to be. He's been using a stolen identity." The room went still for me. "He's a ghost, Marty? Whoever he is, he's been pretending to be someone else for God knows how long." That revelation sat in my stomach like lead. All this time I thought it was about jealousy or revenge. But now we were dealing with something darker. Calculated. Over the next couple of weeks, things shifted. Brooke was still in the ICU, but she was showing signs of improvement. The bandages started to come off. Her color was returning. One of the machines monitoring her brain showed little flickers of activity that gave the doctors hope. I wish I could say it gave me hope. But sitting there listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor, I was just tired. Bone-deep tired. I must have drifted off in that chair, eyes half closed, thoughts scattered. Then I heard it. Soft. Raspy. "Hey Marty, you awake?" I snapped upright so fast the table beside me shook, sending a cup and saucer crashing to the floor. The noise brought the nurses running in seconds. But I didn't care about the mess. All I could do was stare at her. Brooke's eyes were open. Groggy, glazed, but open. And she was looking right at me. I must have said something to Brooke when she woke up, but I honestly couldn't tell you what it was. My head was spinning. Next thing I remember, the doctors were sweeping into the room and I was gently ushered out. Once I hit the hallway, I started making calls. And it was like a chain reaction. People started showing up one after the other. Friends. Family. Curious coworkers. Word had spread fast. A couple days later, Amy tracked me down. She got out of a cab looking like she was ready for a fight. I was sitting by the pool at the local rec center, just trying to clear my head when she marched right up to me. "You want to tell me what the hell this is, Marty?" she snapped. "What's your problem?" I asked. "I'm not allowed to take a few days off?" "Not when your wife needs you, you're not." I let out a breath and looked her dead in the eye. "You're forgetting something. Brooke's not my wife anymore. She divorced me, remember? She made it real clear she didn't need me in her life." Amy crossed her arms. "Then why'd you sit by her hospital bed every single day?" "Because," I said, "I didn't know what kind of state she'd be in if she woke up. I didn't want her to be alone if it was bad. She wasn't just moody, Marty. The doctors think she's been battling depression for a long time, probably ever since little Katie passed." I looked away. "And all those mood swings?" Amy went on. "Yeah, the hormone thing made it worse, but it wasn't just PMS. The psychiatrists say it was something deeper. Something she's been carrying for years. She accused me of trying to kill her." "Amy," I said quietly, "I don't care what the psychiatrists say, that's not something I need in my life." Later, as I was packing up my apartment, I was moving to a smaller place across town. Doug stopped by. He filled me in on the investigation. Still no sign of Tony Pride. At least, not the identity he'd been using. Turns out the real guy was long gone, and the man we knew was likely someone else entirely. Doug said they believed he was an illegitimate relative, maybe a great-nephew, of the man who left Brooke that inheritance. Since he wasn't officially recognized, he'd be cut out of the will unless there were no other living heirs. Doug asked why I hadn't gone to see Brooke since I got back into town. I didn't have a good answer. We'd gone through so much, losing our daughter, the divorce, the accusations. I guess I just felt like maybe I was part of the past she needed to leave behind. After all that, I started fresh. Got recruited by another company, took the job, and tried to rebuild. I dated here and there, nothing serious, just casual. You get burned like I did and you learn to keep your distance. One of the women I went out with belonged to the local country club. She introduced me to golf. I was terrible at it, but it was the most exercise I'd had in years. Eventually, I joined the club myself. Mostly I played alone, less embarrassing that way. One afternoon, I was out there finishing a solo round when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "You know who I am, don't you?" I knew, but I didn't want to admit it. "Point me toward the clubhouse," I said, standing up and brushing off my pants. "What about your gear?" the voice asked. I'll walk back later. I'll get one of the caddies to bring it in. I can't let you just walk away like this, she said. I'll come with you. I turned back once. No, don't. You've already messed up my life enough. Her voice cracked. Marty, I never meant to hurt you. I didn't realize how much damage I'd done until it was too late. I didn't say anything. Just kept walking. She called after me, softer this time. That's what she's paid for, she added with a faint smile, nodding toward a woman waiting by the clubhouse. Life goes on.